Welcome everybody to the UK Immersive Takeover. We have a packed and brilliant day here at Cedar Street, and we're delighted to be here. I'd like to say a massive congratulations to all of you, because you're the real stars for managing to get here this early on a Tuesday morning at South by Southwest. We all know what kind of sacrifice that takes. So well done everybody. Today is presented by a whole group of UK organisations that are pushing forwards the UK immersive industry. We've got Audience of the Future Live, who are supporting the first session. Unboxed, which is a huge festival taking place across the UK. Arts Council England, the British Council, and the Department of International Trade. For the Audience of the Future, you'll find on the tables, you'll find stickers with a QR code, because everyone's got to have a QR code these days, which leads you to the full programme that we have at South by Southwest, and also the programme in general. You'll also see these postcards on the tables which outline what's happening across the rest of the day. So we're kicking off this morning with Dreammakers. I probably don't need to introduce the Royal Shakespeare Company, because they'll do that themselves, but you can see it's a great panel and a great demonstration, and something that you will have never seen before. After they have done their session, we have a panel which is going to talk about the latest gaming and theatre technologies and how that is affecting live performance, with Professor Andrew Chitty from Audience of the Future, Leah Curter from I2 Media, who did a lot of the research around the impacts of Dream, Martin Taylor from Prox and Reverie, who are doing some incredible mixed reality content with Warner Brothers IP, and Sarah Ellis from the Royal Shakespeare Company, is director of the digital side there as well. So I'm going to get off stage now, because there's professionals to do this properly. I'm going to hand over to the Royal Shakespeare Company. Have a great day, and we hope to see you here across the rest of the day. Oh, one last thing I forgot to say. There's food and beverages throughout the day, so there's a very good reason to stay here. Enjoy the sessions. We'll see you during the day. Thanks.
Thanks, Sam, and good morning, everyone. I've got a microphone, but I'm using my real voice at the top of it so we don't get squeak, because I'm standing in front of the stage. But hello, welcome. Thanks for coming out early morning to see us. Sorry. Thanks, Anne. Not a professional. Forgive me. So my name's James Tumble. I'm a producer in the digital development department of the Royal Shakespeare Company, and we're here today to present a reflection on Dream, which was a project that happened exactly this time last year, and we were beamed out across the world, including to South by Southwest, over 10 performances. So Dream was a world-first production. It was a real-time, live motion capture show that was delivered to audiences via laptops, mobile phones, and other devices all around the world. What we're going to do today is show you a little bit about how we made Dream, and I'm here today with two fantastic artists from part of the team. I have Sarah Perry, who's a movement director for Dream, and Maggie Bain, who played Cobweb. They will show you some of the processes we went through for Dream, but actually inspired by the ideas behind Dream and R&D and extending that into the organisation. We're going to show you where our thinking's got over that, from that time to this year in the future. So what I should say is, forgive me while I operate. There's three of us here today, but Dream was part of a demonstrator program for the Audience of the Future, and involved a consortium of 14 interdisciplinary, international, creative and research organisations. So although there's three of us here with you today, there was a much, much bigger team that were involved in the process of that. As you can imagine, a project like that was a huge tech stack. What we're not going to do is go through the full tech build for you today, although at the end of it there is time to ask questions, and I've got a few slides I can show you on that. But rather, we're here with some creative and artists, and we want to talk to you the creative process of working in this medium. So before we start, I've got a short film to give you a bit of background for Dream.
Follow me.
This project is a sort of amazing hybrid of gaming technology, orchestral music and theatre.
The project is a huge collaboration involving lots of different specialisms focused on performance using technology.
It's really about us seeing whether we can present the world of A Midsummer Night's Dream to an audience and allow them to interact in that world live without leaving their homes.
Shall we have some mischief here?
There is a multitude of technology being used on this project.
The advancement of technology, both in hardware and software, has allowed us really to do things that just weren't possible in the past. Live mocap is a very new thing. It means there's more fluidity and more opportunity for creative expression.
So it's really working with the actors to find their physical embodiment of the characters. What reads well in live performance doesn't necessarily read well on the avatar's body.
We are able to take the movements of the actors in the motion capture with an amazing piece of software called Gestrument, and this allows the actors to play digital instruments with their movement.
Central to the show is a huge, earth-shattering, tumultuous storm. It's a very good metaphor for what we've all been through. In the last year, we've all experienced things being taken away from us, things that we love, things that we delight in.
We were at the point where we were imagining that we would produce a digital experience that would be visitor-based and be attended. And then, of course, COVID hit. We were really fortunate in the fact that actually 3 days before we were forced to halt everything was that we had recorded the music.
Didn't realise this at the time, but this was the last moment we'd be there collectively with such a huge group of people for a really long time. And then the Monday after the lockdown happened, that was when we stopped production, but we had this music.
We are going to take you out of your homes and into a forest tonight. It is beautiful and slightly unpredictable.
We're not going to have that audience in person, but actually now is the time to absolutely embrace that remote audience, that digital audience.
We're ready. Now, as soon as we get in there, you will see me become Puck. Wish me luck.
You feel like you've been in a large group, experiencing together a story and a journey. I think that's what we've been missing so much over the last year.
I'd really love audiences to feel like they've experienced something genuinely different and illuminating, and also celebrate the research and development and the experimentation and the risk of what this piece is.
Thank you very much. So I hope that gave a little bit of insight into the project. It was a huge multidisciplinary R&D research, so we could do a million versions of this presentation talking about various aspects of the work. The RSC is an already international organisation. We have our base in Stratford-upon-Avon. We perform in London, in New York, and on tour around the world. This was different, and we were able to reach 65,000 people over 10 performances in 150 countries around the world in a shared live experience in real time being performed from Portsmouth. Here's some facts and figures if you're into the facts and figures of the reach, but it was an outstanding opportunity for the organisation and in terms of reaching these figures. So 150,000 new users on the website, and like I said, 65,000 people watched live with us. And I've just added this slide in to show you how they watch Dream. So we run theatres and operate in theatres which have a beautiful environment around them, and people created their own while we were there, which was very special. So, enough from me. I'm going to introduce our artists to you. So, just to remind you, this is Sarah Perry, who is the movement director on Dream. They use she, her pronouns. And this is Maggie Bain, who's the actor who played Cobweb in Dream. They use they, them pronouns. So I'm going to hand over, and do you want to give us a little bit of info of what you do?
Yep. Thank you, James. Hi, everyone. Good morning. As James said, Sarah Perry. I work as a movement coach, movement director in film, TV, theatre, and animation. One of the excitements of working with Dream was I've worked with motion capture quite a lot for 10 years, but never live. So that was kind of my, I guess the enticement of getting me involved in this project was like, how are we going to do that? And we're going to talk about today, it's a very, very different creative process working with motion capture live.
Hi there, my name is Maggie Bain. I'm an actor across stage and screen and motion capture. I also work as a movement practitioner, and I teach acting for mocap and things like that as well. Broad spectrum.
So we're going to start with Dream. We're going to start kind of looking at Cobweb, but what we want to kind of take you on a journey of what we're thinking of exploring now. We're still in an R&D phase. We're not kind of working on anything in particular. There is no goal. We've just been working in Stratford-upon-Avon last month for about 3 weeks, just playing, just seeing what interests us as creatives. What is the potential? Where can we take this? What are we enjoying? What is not working for us? And most importantly, what is interesting for an audience, and how can we connect with that? So we're going to take you kind of from Dream to where we're at now. So Maggie playing Cobweb, I think we'll start just with a Cobweb demonstration of how that was kind of mechanically portrayed. So we'll see it first, and I think then we'll talk about it afterwards. Yep.
Okay. Yeah,
perfect.
Great. Okay. So a little demo of exactly what we did. Yeah. Okay. Never so weary, never so in woe, bedabbled with the dew and torn with briars, I can no further crawl, no further go. My legs can keep no pace with my desires.
Thank you. Good. Yay.
Thank you very much.
So this is really an example for us of how a performer in mocap puppeteers an avatar. And, you know, that's all good and well. But it also is an example of how it's very challenging for Maggie as an actor and as a performer to fully embody and be in the heart, the soul, the emotion, okay, it's just an eyeball, but it's still a character, of Cobweb. So we just want to share with you some of those sort of creative challenges and how we made some of the decisions to kind of support Maggie, still be kind of in Cobweb's soul and emotion and psychology, but still having to functionally puppeteer the character. So do you want to maybe share just kind of how we started the process before we got to where we got to?
Okay,
yeah.
Well, so there's mechanics of Cobweb, and there's 3 parts of Cobweb I can control. The eyelids, the opening and closing of the eye, where the eye's looking, and the dilation of the iris. And so when the animation team first brought me Cobweb, which was quite close to our final performance, their suggestion was that we just sort of puppeteer Cobweb like this, with a hand, opening and closing the eyeball, distance, moving forward and back, could control the dilation and just moving it around the space like this could focus the eyeball. But the problem with that is it's very difficult for me to put anything emotive, connect to breath, connect to emotion into that movement. This also already has connotations for us. We're used to doing this to people, and the connotations for that are, you know, you're talking too much. If we use a voice with it, it tends to be kind of high-pitched, or a sort of Muppet voice. And I can fight against that, but it's just another thing that I have to fight against. And doing that to another actor in order to communicate with them, it's not satisfying. It doesn't lead to anything that feels very truthful. So we wanted something that we could put a little bit more emotion, a bit more weight, something with a bit more control for me that I could connect to, and that thus I could connect to M, who was playing Puck. So we came up with mechanics of distance between hands, open and closes the eye. The foot controls the dilation of the pupil, and where my head is looking allows me to follow M. And this was great because it allowed me to put a bit more movement into it. I could play that bigger emotion, I could bring it in, and I could bring it small, and I could control that. The tricky thing was, because of the nature and the specificity of our environment, meant that I had to look at the screen in order to be able to make sure that I was looking at where Puck was, which meant I wasn't able to have any eye contact or direct communication with M, who I was actually acting against. So again, it was great. It was a fast solution that we found in the time that we had, and it allowed me to go much deeper than this would have, but it was still problematic.
And I think as well, Maggie and M could never kind of look into each other's eyes as performers. So again, you know, having that as a gesture, M wouldn't be able to take any signals or cues or understand. I mean, could hear the voice, but what about that kind of physical embodiment? So at least through M's peripheral vision could kind of get a flavor of, okay, Maggie's opening now, there's a moment here. And Maggie could do the performance different every show. You know, maybe it didn't open up so much. Maybe, you know, took more of a kind of a wider arm movement, for example, and M could sense that. They were really physically listening to one another. So that sort of helped with that. But I think, you know, moving forward, we may have made different decisions, but that's where we got to at that time, and that's what worked. So it was more of a functional performance, as opposed to a full embodied, characterful, physical embodiment of that character.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. So did you want to look at anything else with Cobweb?
What do we want to look at? I can't remember.
Okay, all right, well then let's probably move on. So that, I mean, and it was great. Like, there's loads to connect to here. There's loads to play with. But as an actor, it's not that I need the tech to do all the things that I can do, but I'd like the tech to meet me a little bit closer to where I am. The exciting thing about this is now I can play anything. I mean, this is absolutely the first time in my career I've ever played an eyeball. And that's really exciting. But the thing about it is that I don't want to be thinking about the mechanics of the eyeball, and that is what I'm thinking about. Most of my brain is taken up with, when should the eye be open? When should it be closed? When should it be following Puck? Yeah. Where is Puck moving to? I need to make sure that I do that. And the more that I'm thinking about that, the less I'm thinking about what I want to do with the lines. The less I'm thinking about the effect that I want to have on my actor. And these things are happening, but they're not happening in, as I said, a very truthful and connected way. It's making my job a lot harder. And the exciting thing about this tech is that it should be opening up the possibilities of what I can do, which it kind of is, but it's also restricting the techniques that we use to get there. We want to hold the audience. I want my focus to be on other characters. I want my focus to be on making sure that I'm holding that audience in a space that helps them follow the story. The story has to be the most important thing.
And I think just one more thing to say is that every single character that was in Dream, I mean, Maggie as Cobweb, we had to kind of come to these solutions, but it wasn't the same solutions for every single character. So Moth had a sort of a different framework to work around, Peaseblossom another. So it was finding really varied individual solutions for each character. So it wasn't like, oh, here's the rule book, we've sorted it out, oh, this is going to work for Moth as well, this is going to work for Peaseblossom. It was finding something that not only allowed the avatar to functionally come to life, but to work with the actor and what resonated with them to find that connection as well. So it felt truthful as much as it could to that connection from self to character, if that makes sense. So I guess now moving on, what we are particularly interested in is, okay, we have these otherworldly characters, and we have a kind of a functional drive to make them come to life. But what if we took a real human with a very similar sort of skeletal, anatomical specification to the performer, that had a face, had eyes, had mouth, had facial expressions? None of the characters, apart from Mustardseed, of course, Cobweb is an eye, Puck, Peaseblossom, Moth didn't have faces. They didn't have eyes. They didn't have mouths that could potentially communicate to an audience. So we've been exploring really the opposite extreme of finding naturalism and finding more of a truthful portrayal of a character, looking at the psychology, looking at naturalistic, mundane movements of the hands, the feet, the extremities, of the torso, of the face, and really getting deep with an emotion of the character, and again, interrogating text, interrogating the psychology, I would say, looking at concepts for the production, and getting, not saying that Dream wasn't deeper, but how can we connect emotionally, you know, feeling that character's emotion and giving you, you know, empathy, or you have compassion towards that character, for example, in a different way. And we don't know the answers. We're exploring. What we're going to show is not kind of, oh yeah, that's where we're at. We have questions. We have questions and conversations that we want to have with developers and animators and tech people to sort of help us get to where potentially we might want to be. So we've been looking at Macbeth as an example. And we've chosen a particular soliloquy of Macbeth. So do you want to maybe give some factual information, first of all, about Macbeth. This scene?
Sure.
Yes.
So I'm sure a lot of you will know the story of Macbeth, so forgive me for just a second while we catch anybody up that might not be so familiar with it. I'm going to paraphrase the synopsis. So at the beginning of the play we have a sort of member of the aristocracy, not high up. Macbeth just had a tremendous victory at war, returning home from this victory, runs into 3 witches who tell him, you're going to be king. He thinks, great. And he runs home and he tells his wife, and she's like, fantastic. I think the king is coming to dinner tonight. Let's kill him. Let's speed it up. So this speech that we've chosen is the speech where Macbeth is waiting. There has been a banquet. Macbeth has not gone to that banquet. His wife has, and he's waiting for the signal from his wife to say, Duncan, the king has gone to bed. It's time. Go and kill him. After this speech, they then do that, and chaos ensues. So that's a sort of potted version of the plot of Macbeth. That's sort of everything that you need to know.
And I think what really interested us about this particular moment in the play, there was so much that we could have pulled out, was this is the first time we felt that we saw Macbeth struggle with his emotions. So he's this sort of killing machine, always been in battle, always been at war, and is okay with that. But now this is the first time there's that premeditated, measured, I'm going to kill someone. So we were looking at what that sort of brought up for him psychologically, emotionally, thoughtfully. And that battle between that reptilian brain, that kind of killing machine, survival, versus that limbic brain, that kind of emotional torment, that struggle that he has with what he's about to do. So we were considering things like post-traumatic stress, anxiety, and that kind of push-pull between should I, shouldn't I, and how that potentially can physically manifest. So first of all, why don't we just take a couple of lines and we'll just look at some facial expressions and to see, and this is also how, maybe observe, if you can, kind of what Maggie is doing, facially, expression, mouth, eyes, etc., and how well or not well that is reading in our Macbeth.
Thou sure and firm set earth, hear not my steps. Which way they walk, for fear thy very stones prate of my whereabout, and take the present horror of the time which now suits with it.
Good. So we're struggling with this a little bit. in the sense that Maggie has gone through this journey of rehearsal, finding the character, connecting to the text, connecting to the words, and if it was a live performance, is feeling those thoughts, is expressing those thoughts, and it looks quite naturalistic in live performance. But when we take it to here, for example, the mouth is potentially doing too much. The eyes are not really doing anything at all, and so therefore it's losing that truth. So this is one of our struggles as creatives in terms of directing and in terms of taking direction, is you have to sometimes give really weird guidance that is not necessarily helpful for the actor to still feel connected to the character. So I might give Maggie direction such as, all right, here we go. I want you to do a lot less with your mouth,
Okay.
but a lot more with your eyes, but still stick to the truth and the intention of that moment.
Okay.
No pressure.
Alrighty, let's give this a go. Be prepared for the worst acting I've ever done. Okay, here we go. Thou sure and firm set earth, hear not my steps, which way they walk, for fear thy very stones prate of my whereabout, and take the present horror of the time which now suits with it.
Thank you.
Can't believe you're applauding that, you're so kind.
So we're getting somewhere, right? Potentially, we're getting somewhere. We're not there, but we're getting there. So you can see that there was much more expression with the eyes. The mouth is not always, in sync necessarily. I'll just wait for this siren again. There it goes. Yeah, so we're getting there with the eyes. The mouth is doing a little less, but is going perhaps in the right direction. But every time we're giving those functional guidances, Maggie is disconnecting more and more from character and disconnecting more and more from that truth that we were discovering in rehearsal. And then from those beautiful, naturalistic, micro-facial expressions that had been found during that rehearsal time. So yeah, talk to them about how that feels.
It's a total head wrecker. So I was listening to a podcast with one of the actors in the Assassin's Creed franchise, and they said acting in mocap is kind of like your heart is in theatre and your head is in the cinematic space, which is great, and I totally relate to that. The issue with that is that we have theatrical frameworks as performers as to how we approach that kind of performance, and it's a very different framework that we use for cinema. We can do both, but they are very separate things. We can cross these things over, but it isn't a simple process. And in this example, I can sort of get this idea I can get my head around the idea of heart and head in different places. A bit trickier to get your head around the idea of your eyes being in one place and your mouth being in the other. I sort of think of my face as being connected and the eyes reflect what the mouth is doing. When I have to disconnect those things, same thing again. All I'm focused on is trying to achieve that task. The delivery of that performance changes. The way I say those lines changes. It's impossible for me to connect to the work that we've done in terms of our creative process, the exciting things that we've been discovering about where we think Macbeth is emotionally at this time. It's hard to play. It's easy to fail, which is fine. We're very comfortable with failure, but it's hard to push through that failure when you're struggling to get an idea of what works and what it feels like when it works, because it never, ever feels comfortable.
And it's really about wanting to have conversations with developers, with animators, with technical teams to work together to try and find what tech can support this creative process, and then have them in the room right at the beginning during rehearsals to see what our intentions are or what our creative findings were, so then that can be highlighted, through the tech, rather than sort of putting the tech onto the performance and then having to make compromises. Because, again, as a movement director or director of motion capture, you feel silly giving those directions too, as as an actor, feels silly in a way taking that direction, and you're doing your job, but you know that you should be having different conversations, again, about that truth, and it's about connecting with the audience. So if Maggie is disconnected to character, then how can the audience be connected to that character? So we want to try and support the performer as much as possible to keep that connection. And we're not saying that we want like for like. If we were putting on a production, we might not want that. But we want to test it to its limits to see how much scope that we have to play with. So we're not being bound by what we can't do. We want to kind of push it. We want that truth. We want that realism. We want those naturalistic subtleties, so we have more performance choices, and then we can stylize them and, you know, turn the volume down of them, etc.
Yeah, because we're also a theatre company, and we're interested in that live connection with our audience, whether that's in a virtual space or whether that's right in front of us in the same shared space. It's very difficult for us as actors to do that if we're super focused on just making it work, just making it read passably, as opposed to being able to just embody it with truth and being alive to the offers that our audience might be making to us through laughter, through gasps, through any kind of interaction that we might even have with them, through this sort of immersive or augmented, you know, virtual landscape we might be performing in.
So are you up for doing the whole monologue? So here we'll see more of a whole full performance, a full physical embodiment of Macbeth. And again, we'll talk about some elements that we've been considering or been challenged by and want to explore further afterwards, but we'll see it first. So just give yourself a moment and then go for it.
So we have a portable tech kit with us, so we don't have hand capture, so there will be some little things that are looking a bit weird, so please forgive those, but hopefully you'll get the general gist. Is this a dagger I see before me? The handle toward my hand. Come, let me clutch thee. I have thee not, and yet I see thee still. Art thou not, fatal vision, sensible of feeling, as of sight? Or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from the hate-oppressed brain? I see thee yet, in form as palpable as this which now I draw. Thou marshallest me the way I was to go, and such an instrument I was to use. Mine eyes are made the fools of the other senses, or else worth all the rest. I see thee still, and on thy blade and dudgeon gouts of blood, which was not so before. There's no such thing. It is the bloody business which informs thus to mine eyes. Now, o'er the one half-world, nature seems dead. Witchcraft celebrates pale Hecate's offerings. Wicked dreams abuse the curtain's sleep, and withered murder, alarmed by his sentinel the wolf, whose howls his watch. Thus, with his stealthy pace, with Tarquin's ravishing strides towards his design, moves like a ghost. Thou sure and firm-set earth, hear not my steps. Which way they walk, for fear thy very stones prate of my whereabout, and take the present horror of the time which now suits with it. Whilst I threat, he lives. Words to the heat of deeds too cold breath gives. I go, and it is done. The bell invites me. Heed it not, Duncan, but it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell. Thank you. Thank you.
Well done. So there's a lot to talk about, right? When this, we are not working with this as a polished performance. We are exploring. We're interrogating what works, what doesn't, what we want, what we desire, and what we are interesting to have more conversations about and challenged by. So from my movement perspective, we're interested in things like body, effort, space, shape, so many aspects, and there's so much, I'd love to kind of converse with, but let's just take a couple today that we can maybe explain a bit more. So one aspect that we feel is missing, there's many, is weight, is that idea of that balance between gravity, that downward spatial pull, especially when you've got something that's about trauma, about something that sort of brings you down. It's dark, it's deep, low, strong, heavy, balanced with levity, that kind of upward spatial pull. When is Macbeth feeling that kind of upness, that anxiety? When is he feeling rooted and grounded down to the ground? I think with the metahumans and the avatars, of course you have post-production, you can add this in, but this is live. The extremities do a lot of the talking, the hands, the feet, the arms, the legs, but these subtleties are sometimes what we feel we want more of. So the audience then can connect to that idea, and weight is just one example of many things. So that kind of strong down gravity versus up. So Maggie is doing it in live performance and feeling that tensions, that push, that pull, but it's not necessarily reading in the avatar. There's just a sort of gliding, floating, and it's pretty consistent throughout, and it's not really conveying our intention. Do you have anything else to add on that from your point?
No, that's exactly right. And it's sort of, you do all this work as an actor, and you're working on intention and choices and listening to what your other actors are offering you and responding to your environment. It's a really, really complex process, and then you get it in the space and it feels right, and then you see it in this environment and you look at everything and you go, it's not there. All that work is not there. How do we have time to find it? And again, at that point, when you've done all that work, you're kind of going back to square one. And the time is then just being eaten up by trying to fight your muscle memory. And that's one thing that we do. As an actor, I can only think about one thing at a time. That's the purpose of our long rehearsal processes. As I get in the room, I can play with physicality to a point that I can then forget about it. And then I'm adding layer upon layer upon layer of choices and choices and choices. So when we finally put this in the environment or in these characters, we're then having to unpick. We're having to take lots and lots of layer and color and detail out of our performances and able to give something that looks passable. And it can look passable, and I'm sure to some audiences it's fine, but in terms of like really being able to hold the story, really being able to engage across all audiences, we want that detail. We want that connection. We want that truth.
Yeah, and it's really, and that's the choice we're making, is going really deep into not only the character, but with the words, with the text, with the language. And I think you need those nuances and that detail to help convey that intention. And I think another thing that we're both quite passionate about as practitioners is the breath, particularly with Shakespeare, but in anything. And I think Maggie is using the breath intentionally to, again, convey emotion, to convey thought, to tell a story, to feel what Macbeth is feeling in that moment. There's that inhalation, there's the exhalation, there's the pause after the inhale, and there's a pause after the exhale, and they are all really important beats. And we were exploring, for example, Macbeth, that anxiety. Where is that held? That's held after the inhalation because you can't breathe it out. And Maggie's doing that, feeling that, exploring that, but yet we can't see that here. And again, it's not that we want to use that in performance, but if we can get that detail and those subtleties, it will really help translate the story that we want to tell. So again, I think the extremities are doing a lot of the talking, the hands, the feet, the legs, the arms, but what about the torso? That expresses so much. The breath, you can see what Maggie's doing. We don't want it, too much, but just something there that we can see. Again, that upward spatial pull, that downward. It doesn't have to be high level, floor level, but just a little subtle movement that is working with the narrative. Any further thoughts on that, Maggie?
No, I think you've covered pretty much all of that there. Yeah.
And then there's so much that we've been kind of interrogating, and I think just finally a touch, tactileness. If we haven't got the hand capturing today, but if we wanted again to use the hands to even just touch the costume, to really feel the weight of that chair, to really feel the weight of that floor, to touch that earth, just to have that connection with the ground. And you could see, when Maggie, we intentionally sort of put that in, there was a moment where Maggie sort of hand to head, this is also an obstacle. The structure of the helmet, the iPhone, that's another barrier that we have to sort of work towards. And I know if we had post-production, we could put a lot of the dots on the face and then that could be sorted. But what about if we're doing it live? What do we need? What sort of cameras could we maybe have in the space, or what else that helps Maggie stay with the character, not to have to think about something functional again? Any other thoughts on that, or is that?
It's just that more, and that's the thing. We as creatives are not necessarily always going to go for human characters. This is the exciting thing about this technology. Now anybody can play anything, anybody. And again, it's in terms of access as to who those actors are, who can be in this space portraying these things, these storytelling creatures or people or whatever it is. So that's really exciting. But again, it's about empowering them with the tools because so that they can tell the story. The more, again, that we're just thinking about going through the practicalities of how to make it work, the less we get to tell the story, the less we get to communicate, and that's what we're really after here. It's the power of that communication, the power of putting those storytelling skills in the hands of people that can really move us, change us, reach new audiences, talk to people that we haven't spoken to before. There are a lot of people out there that don't think that theatre is for them. And this technology is opening up what theatre can be, and can be a real leveler. But we don't want people spending as much time thinking about the practicalities.
So another thing that we're exploring as well is giving the actor some agency to some of those technical things. So Matt Peel is here somewhere today, the lighting designer. So if you have any questions for Matt, he'll be here. But what if we lost Macbeth's head?
So embarrassing when this happens. Just give me a second. I think so. Am I good? Sorry for anyone that was triggered by that.
Should have done a warning. Yeah, so how, what would it be like if instead of it being programmed at a specific moment in the production, if the actor could turn the lights on, turn the lights off, choose when to have more shadow, less shadow, just playing around lots of ideas. So maybe you want to do a quick little...
Yes, great. Yes, so Matt Peel has designed this bit of kit that we can play with, and it sort of works in a very similar way to gesturement. So at the moment it's controlled by the distance between my hands. That can change. It could be controlled by absolutely anything. And again, it's not another thing that I necessarily want to have control of during a whole show. We have extremely talented designers in our industry that can do that a lot better than I can. And again, it takes me out of what it is that I'm trying to do to the audience. But there may be moments in a show where I do want this power. As an actor, we are the ones in front of that audience holding them in a moment. And it might be a great empowering tool for us to know exactly when to bring that light down at the end of a show. When we've developed a more playful relationship with a specific audience, and we might want to tease them with that. If I'm an actor sneaking up on another actor on stage management and whoever's cueing me are up there just crossing my fingers that I'm doing my job properly and I'm in the right place at the right time. But again, what if I can play with that? What if we can have more fun? What if we keep playing with the effectiveness of that moment all throughout performance because we have control over the lighting? So it's just some interesting tools that we've been playing with. Those are a couple of examples. There are a million more as to how this tech could be quite useful to us.
And keeping that liveness as well, and spontaneity for you and the fellow performers. But absolutely, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. This is not an easy environment for an actor, so please show us. Thank you, Sarah and Maggie.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Just before we wrap up, I wanted to signpost to a phenomenal resource that was made by one of the consortium, Marshmallow Laser Feast. In fact, Oriana is here if you have questions for them. They were a design studio who led all the creative work on, digital creative work on Dream. Findings of the Future is you can use a QR or the URL on there. There is 20 long-form interviews with all departments working on Dream, from quality assurance, how actors work in motion capture, how we use sound in this environment, how show control works, how you look after audiences in this space. So this was a really good way of sharing our findings from the project back with you. Not only is there Zooms on there, we've uploaded, or MLF have uploaded documents to support it. So for example, our pre-show checklist, which started 2.5 hours out of every performance, that is up there and you can access and you can see what the processes were for us to keep the show on the road. So that's a very generous thing, and I hope that's really useful to you. Now, I said I wasn't going to talk about tech, but I just want to show you this slide very quickly, which shows you a little bit of the tech stack and how we try to contextualize that from our point of view. We're theatre people, so we understand stage and backstage and front of house, and what does that look like in a digital environment. I'll get out of the way. Lovely. Okay, well, that's it from us. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us for this session. We are the Royal Shakespeare Company. I just want to say thank you very much for your time. We're around for questions. There's a panel straight after us, but we'll be hanging out in the bar area, so do feel free to come and chat. Thank you very much.
I'm Andrew Chitty. I'm the challenge director of this thing that we've called Audience of the Future over the last few years. And what we've been trying to do is, it's kind of an attempt to do a comprehensive R&D program so that the creative industries, UK creative industries, can make the best use of immersive technologies. And one of the things we did in that program was 4 big demonstrators, of which Dream, which was the basis of the workshop before, or the starting point for it, was one of those. Now, you can see workshops done by 2 of our other demonstrators. So that's our Visitor Experience demonstrator, which became a thing called Lost Origin, which featured ghostly dinosaurs. And the Wallace and Gromit Big Fix-Up, which was an AR project across the whole city. You can see workshops from those in the Fairmont today, if you get a chance. But what we're going to do now is build on, perhaps, and tease out some of the dynamics of where the performance sector is going with this technology. You know, I think it was referred to as in the video as the latest gaming tech, which suddenly sounds like it's amazing how doing a video and then 6 months later you think, no, I don't think we call it that anymore. But I think technology is probably only a bit of what we're going to talk about, and probably we're going to talk about more about psychological states and about performance and about emotion. So to help me do that, I'm going to call up this rather brilliant panel. So first on stage, Sarah Ellis, Digital Director of the RSC. Please come on, pick up a mic, choose a seat. And the on switch is on the bottom, apparently, but you know, you're familiar with these kind of things. Then we've got Martin Taylor. Where's Martin? Martin. So Martin is founder of Prox and Reverie, one of the most exciting creative technology companies in the UK. This works well, you see. You get the applause at the start. I know what could go wrong now. And then we've got Leah Curter, who is newly installed, possibly by me, as Director of Research at IT Media Research. Right, lovely. Okay, so where should we start? Sarah, it seems sensible to start with you. You ready?
Dear.
Oh, good. No, okay. So, Maggie and James and Sarah, they gave a brilliant workshop of not just what you did in Dream, but where this starts to go next. So, Where do you think it goes next for you, as both in your current role and also beyond the RSC in the rest of the industry?
What I think, taking a step back, what I think the Audience of the Future programme has done brilliantly for the arts and culture sector is highlight the importance of research and development, but not just as a project that leads to an outcome, but actually an entire cultural ecosystem of R&D. So where we're going next is commitment to R&D in a wider context, in the context of how we make our work, embedding it in every aspect of how we make our work, whether that's the text or whether that's the technology. So our programming now involves this sort of interrogation and rigor in its whole context, and that's a massive strategic shift for us. It's a massive opportunity for us, and it's a massive shift in our working practices and processes, and it couldn't have happened without Audience of the Future. But where I see the next phase of this work going is beyond project and definitely into a cultural state that allows us to recognise that when we're looking at new and emergent forms of technology, embedding them with an audience and getting that feedback from that audience is how we're going to iterate that technology much more imaginatively and much more usefully for our sector. And so we need to broaden out now. We need to take the people that we've worked with, make sure that they're always sharing their learnings, but also make sure we're broadening the scope of who we're working with and who that's for to broaden the impact.
But it was interesting, as part of that, I think the workshop really brings out that once you get the performers really engaged with using the technology, then you access all sorts of areas of subtlety, whether it's haptics or breath or things like that, the technology is going to have to go quite a long way to deliver on. There's a high set of expectations there.
I mean, the best storytelling technology there is the live actor, which we've spoken about, but also that is a really important thing, is that it's not just an appropriation of new technology into a process. The depth and the level of detail that we need to go into is huge if we're going to really meaningfully adopt these technologies. Otherwise, they'll just come in when we need them and they won't be embedded, what I would call holistically. But also what's brilliant is to often, and we've spoken about this a lot in our practice, is we leave the creative out. They come in, they do a gig, they rock up, do their lines. But as you can see with Maggie and Sarah and James, practitioners, whether you're a producer, an actor, or part of the creative team, they are the people that need to speak of and understand this technology way more than me. And this is the important next phase.
Okay, so that seems like a good place to bring in Martin, because I found the first time I went to your studio, thinking of you as a creative technology company, doing all sorts of, really fantastic things with digital, physical interaction. It was really interesting to see that you have performers embedded in your lab, throughout. So tell us a bit. You're also really interested in kind of making workflows so that this is easier for everybody and you can extend it. Tell us a bit about which angle you're coming at performance from with Progs.
So we are considering the actor, the performer, and the world that they are performing in using these new mediums. So it was great to kind of see these guys up on stage and see Maggie's performance. And really from her perspective and hearing about some of the challenges, it's really an inside-outward kind of challenge. How do you project and connect as a performer? We're looking at it from the outside in, and we're developing infrastructure. So what is the environment the performance is in, and how can we develop infrastructure technology and tool sets and pipelines where the world can come back and connect with you as a performer and you as an audience, and then connect the performer with the audience in new ways.
So you've brought Interchange. You've been doing a workshop on Interchange, which is a recent project. Do you want to tell people about that if they haven't had a chance to see the workshop?
Yeah, so Interchange, the title comes from the connection between, I always imagined it as almost like a cultural exchange, and it's a freestanding arch system that anchors a physical structure with a virtual experience. And so a group of performers or audience members can peer through this archway, and with the right kind of viewing technology, mixed reality technology, you can open up a gateway and have the flow of reality to another a fictional place or another real world place. So it's a portal jump system, and it's also something physical in the world that you know is more tangible than just performing to thin air.
And so this, I mean, that digital physical interface is quite a challenge, I guess for you, Sarah, as well, because you've still genuinely got real physical theatres to work in.
Hello. Yeah, we do. We have real physical theatres, but also we have a world which exists in both, and it's not an either or, and it is complicated. And as you saw earlier, it's not a like-for-like translation. And how the actor or how the creative holds those spaces is really crucial. So the infrastructural point is really important. Sometimes I think we focus on the content, but actually the infrastructure needs to hold the creative, and so it's great to see what Prox and Reverie do. I think it's really important, and also it's the hard stuff. Like when we did Tempest back in 2016, I remember us saying, well, we can't fix it in post. Like the liveness is a really important, crucial next stage that doesn't often gets overlooked, but I think post-pandemic liveness is a really key factor of what creates our shared experiences and what keeps us together, and knowing that we're doing something together like this together has huge resonance, whether that's in person or virtual, and it is no longer acceptable just to say virtual is far away or virtual is something that you couldn't do because you weren't able to be here. That coexistent piece is really important.
And I guess that brings us, actually, we've been talking about it in the context largely of performers at this point, but liveness is a thing for audiences as well. And these technologies mediate that in different ways. So now it's time to bring Leia in, because I think the thing with audiences is, I know you were involved in Dream, and at first that might have been seen as researching the audience, as how they responded to this. But I think now the work you're doing is, again, pushing that on to not seeing how they respond to it, but also starting to think about what it does for audiences. So what can we do with this technology to engage the emotions of audiences?
Yeah, absolutely. This is working, isn't it? Yeah. I think, what you were saying, Sarah, about liveness is really important, and our research on audiences sort of shows that there are these key elements of any experience that's live that we want to really translate into those tech spaces. So that sense of jeopardy within liveness, the sense that anything could go wrong, audiences seem to really love that, and that's something that they really want retained. They really also want that sense of impromptu connection. So here we can all sort of bump into new people and meet people from across the world, and that's something that we're seeing is such a huge appetite for in this new realm, that you could be in a digital space and meet somebody from across the world that you didn't know, and make that new connection. And the emotional aspects are also clearly really important, those kind of highs and lows and the emotional trajectory, and the engagement of the five senses. And I think that's something that is particularly challenging, but something that's really important to work on, is that kind of like, how do you bring a sense of the tactile and the sense of the real to a remote live piece? So in our work, we're really focused now on understanding those key elements that make live so exciting. And then I suppose really kind of working within the creative process, kind of sharing tools and techniques to kind of think about those key elements and make sure that they're woven into the design of the technology, so that kind of essence of live doesn't get lost.
So you're a research psychologist, so have you kind of formatted this into a nice, easy framework for us to understand?
Oh, indeed. So yeah, it's a kind of an ongoing joke that as researchers and academics, we love an acronym. And so as part of our work moving forward, we've tried to categorize these key states that if you design for the sort of psychological components of a live piece, hopefully audiences will be more engaged and they'll pay more. So we've come up with our impact evaluation and design framework, and impact is an acronym and it stands for interesting. So clearly pieces need to capture the audience interest initially. Meaningful, so it needs to also tap into people's values, their morals, their judgments. Personalized experiences, so people want something that is tailored to them as well. Affective, so that means the emotional arc of a piece. Collective experience, so clearly that social element of a performance. And then transportive, so minimizing distractions, keeping people engaged for the longer term. And we have a sort of, it's a design canvas and a workshop that we run to sort of help, I suppose, turn, we're not suggesting that it replaces the creative process, but it's more about sort of also evaluating it from an audience perspective and thinking about how the design choices you make may elicit those psychological responses in audiences. So,
and you guys, you worked with Sarah on during Dream, and you're carrying on doing some work now on that. I was just wondering how that feels. Is it, because in some ways, if it wasn't for the fact we were talking about technology-mediated performances or digital technology-mediated performances, that just sounds like a list of what you do anyway, in some ways, doesn't it? So I'm wondering how it helps you.
It helps us tremendously because it reminds us that there is a stakeholder that's present in the room when we make our work, which is the audience. And that's really crucial, because if we lose that contract with an audience, then the work, it doesn't matter how brilliant it is, if that connection is lost, that's terrible. But the other thing is that we are making the pressure has been on the content holders for such a long time, making this work, making the distribution infrastructures, making the stages, and we have to bring that out a bit. And so audience research for us is not a retrospective part of R&D, it's very much a parallel stream of activity within our R&D, because, and we have evidence of that. So when we did stop production in Dream, the first place we went to was our audiences, where we worked with I2 and Nesta to find out where our audiences were, and three things came back, which were audiences were craving togetherness, they were craving liveness, but there is a huge digital inequity in people's homes. And that affected how we worked with Marshmallow Laser Feast, Philharmonia, Manchester International Festival and ourselves to come together around that and say, we cannot make it in this technology because that is inaccessible currently to people. We will make creative constraints, and we will affect us creatively, but as a creative team, we understand the purpose and the reasoning around that decision. We made that together, and I believe made the right piece for the right moment in regard to that. We only could do that by having a critical friend working alongside us rather than intrinsic to our making as practitioners, and having that convergence between academics and practice. And that, for me, is a really crucial aspect of research and development.
Martin, I mean, I suppose a lot of your partnerships where you're working at the moment, performance is also related to screen and film, isn't it? So does that feel the same? Does the audience play the same role in that, in terms of thinking about it, or is it more performer focused still?
I think we're an aggregator, so we look at the industry and we're taking the best of techniques, tools, and kind of pulling them all into this pretty unique developer environment we've created called the Forge, and it really is around the idea of convergence, and what we're looking at is one content pipeline that can sit in the center and then can fan out left or right for screen and or for live and interactive, immersive experiences. We see them all as the same thing, because at the end of the day, it always starts with an idea and somebody wanting to communicate a creative idea to an audience. And how you do that, at the moment the industry is very fractured and complicated. So we're looking at it from the middle outwards. But the other concept of convergence that we're thinking about. And again, it's some of these challenges that it's the same challenges you guys are facing, which is how do you inject the fidelity of performance into these new mediums, with even though they're very advanced technologies, they're very crude as far as, and perception of the human form and human energy. And so we're looking at the fidelity of these things as far as, in a practical sense, for example, combining motion capture with volumetric capture. Because the motion capture is tracking the bones inside the body, really. It doesn't consider the skin. And so, once we fuse these things and create new levels of convergence with the techniques, then you can really, really start to, you're talking about the weight and the gravity of the human form and performance. We're looking at those things and then giving the performers tangible aspects in the space to kind of connect with.
And I think that came out, some of those things came out in Maggie and Sarah's talk. I mean, the idea of feeding back to the performer textures and costumes, I mean, that's kind of like a degree of fidelity beyond probably where we are at the moment. Although lots of people in the fashion industry looking at textures and drapes and those kind of things.
I mean, we also work with biofeedback suits. So can the emotion of the performer be transferred to the audience? Or transferred into the environment to kind of mirror how they're really, really feeling about that performance. There's more questions than answers, but
I'm interested to see how that would fit into your psychological states you want to get the audience into.
Yeah, I think that would work really well. And we actually, in speaking to audiences recently, one of the things that kind of came across was that they don't necessarily want a representation of exactly what live would be now just in the digital space. They want something that goes beyond that. And I think biofeedback offers a really exciting opportunity, actually, because the visual kind of feedback, or however you want to do that, could be music, that you offer to audiences. It gives them a different way to, I suppose, interpret a piece of work. So I think we're just offering more to kind of captivate the five senses. So I think that's a really exciting idea, proposition.
I'd be interested if we could just spend a few minutes thinking about if we do that, if we're looking at audiences, certainly through the pandemic, we've looked at remote audiences because of not having to be able to have people in the room. How do you now move on from that to create a unity between remote audiences and in the room without thinking of them as, say, a primary audience and a secondary audience? Do you have a way through that? Because I think it's probably quite an important one, whether it's thinking about whether they pay more or whether it's thinking about the emotional state and is it the same experience? Who wants to take that on?
I mean,
so it's holding a microphone well down by her hip.
Like so far down. I mean, why do we're developing doorway systems and portal systems, and one of the reasons we do that is that we're focusing on that is we're looking to leverage this technology to fold space between physical locations. You can have these super space performances where the performers might be in one space, the set is totally fictional, but it kind of blends half a real world setting. The audience is all across the globe. What's next? How can we really, really lean into the true potential of where this is all going and create new types of experiences and connect physical places together? And the possibilities
so
then are endless.
One possibility there is to have different audiences in different places, but I'm still interested in then, are they the same audience? If live is important and you have a live, I'm still trying to get that microphone slightly near your mouth there, Ellis.
I will just add there that it can feel really complex, but actually from the performer's perspective, they're just dealing with one audience, but the audience can be anywhere.
I think it's about holding space, and I think it's about why. Why would I come in this moment with you wherever I am, whether I'm here, so I'm here, or whether someone is joining me from around the world. And the compelling call to action, and it's not new, because if you look at sports, if you look at football games, if you look at it's the only time my dad has ever multitasked in his life. or you can have a radio feed of one match, be watching one match, and then have another radio with another match on. So we do have those constructs. We do have a comfortableness with multiple storytelling in multiple ways, but he comes to that through a love and a story and a jeopardy and a collective call to action. So let's not forget how when we look at Macbeth or we look at Hamlet in these times and the relevance of storytelling and the relevance of the idea, and it doesn't, I draw upon Shakespeare just because it's part of the job, but also it's not the only story. But Macbeth in this time, making awful decisions, looking at power, who holds power right now, will bring an audience. However they come into that context, it will be, you know, if they're far away, we will make that experience relevant to them, feeling far away. If they're in this room, we will make that experience of the storytelling of who has power now. We will make you feel that differently. How we hold that as one thing is the big architectural challenge, I think.
But so find the thing that brings people together and then work through the problems of the audience of that. That's a really interesting way of approaching it. Any insights do you think from in terms of what the audience feel? Is there a limit to what we can do remotely?
Well, I mean, I think we are obviously partly limited by the technology that we have, but I think audiences are also very interested in the technology, and some of the things that we've been seeing, and just sort of going off on your point, Sarah, that, you know, obviously the content brings people in and that creativity, but we're also seeing that, I mean, audiences, they want and expect a lot, and that's great. Like, they want, in terms of connection, we need to think about how we personalize experiences for people. If you think about how you like to connect with others, everybody's got kind of their own communication style, and so within our work we were looking at, we've been prototyping as part of one of our projects, and we've been thinking about these different ways that audiences could connect remotely. And whilst the sort of reception to some of those ideas, like we were thinking about throwing emojis into a space based on how you move, sort of based on sort of how you moved with your camera tracking you, and we were looking at sort of allowing people to come to digital tables and share their audio. And we got some great feedback, and audiences were very sort of receptive, but one of the things that came out really strongly was that they really wanted more. They wanted to be able to personalize all those different mechanisms of connection. So if you've got audio, I also want to have video, or I want to be able to turn the audience off, or I want to be able to kind of play with the show controls a bit. So maybe I want this kind of lit more brightly. So I think as long as we are tailoring experiences to different kinds of audiences, then they will be held more effectively in the space.
It's going to be a fertile ground for experimentation, though, isn't it? Because going back to your thing, Sarah, your dad is the...
My dad, he's great.
I know,
he's brilliant.
Actually, just fantastically proving middle-aged man can multitask.
Honestly,
I mean,
but he watched Dream. He thought he'd killed Puck, though, in the interactive elements. So there is an onboarding element to that.
But he may have been, that may have been
committed,
the high
though.
point of his evening.
He was totally committed.
But on that, I mean, he will remember, you know, probably the experiment Sky did with multi-camera and allowing audiences to direct the cameras, which was technologically possible, but ultimately absolutely useless. Nobody wanted to do it, because it turned out that people who have a sense of it, who are directors, you know, TV directors who specialise in sport, are really quite good at it. And you know, you can drink beer and watch football with them doing it. Whereas doing it both at the same time is really hard.
But that's what I love, and that's the other next stage, is that we've got this, through the programme that we've just been privileged to be part of, Audience of the Future, it has brought together technology, research and creative practice. And that hadn't happened before. And those forms of collaboration and the rigour and the expertise amongst those three areas, in R&D, it is about going, oh, is that a good idea? And actually a creative going, I have a real problem with someone emojiing me in my performance at the same time. But also we need to give space for that conversation and that R&D to happen, because, and bring the fourth pillar in, which is audience, and I think that comes through research, but also comes through practice, because it is those moments where we do forget what we have already, and we're not reinventing the wheel. We are standing on the shoulders of some phenomenal innovators over hundreds and hundreds of years, but our challenges are not that. I don't doubt innovation. What is important is the values around the innovation and the practice of which we convey. So how do we build for an inclusive future? How do we look at look at the systems of the past and why they did and why they, what were they successful about them, but what did we miss? So that when we look at, did I go on too long?
There's a limit.
Have they cut me off?
No.
Oh man, bastards.
It's a conspiracy.
You can have the dud one. No. Yeah, exactly. It's all right, I can go into mime, it's not a problem.
Of course it's not, of course it's not.
Just finally... oh no, I've been mean to the... Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Just finally, that's the bit we need to think about, is not designing in old ways.
Yeah.
And that's all I have to say.
We might have run out of time, but I'm going to risk this one anyway, which is, it's interesting to be back at South by after the nearly getting on the plane 2 years ago, and it seems to me, from what I've seen, it's been, the last 2 years have been such an extraordinary time in that things have accelerated in ways we didn't expect. Things that we might have expected or might have wanted to do haven't happened. I'm just wondering if there's anything, it seems to me that the transformation of how we make things has gone much faster than what we make or how we make or how we consume it over those 2 years, because we've been locked in bedrooms largely. What would each of you want to see in the next year? Not things that you're going to do yourselves, but what's the bit of data that you'd like to have access to? What's the experiment that you'd like to see somebody else do? That kind of thing. What are you looking out there at these kind of events? What are you looking for that other people are developing?
For us, it's around latency. The idea of latency coming down and down and down. So where we are in our kind of roadmap is, we've kind of done really well with performance, with mocap, and also volumetric capture, kind of fusing those things together in our perfect environment of our lab. But to get to the next stage, to actually connect places together, all of the kind of global infrastructure and transfer speeds and 5G and all these kind of things, they're moving really, really fast. And everyone talks about cloud rendering, for example, so being able to cut the cord on the headsets that we have and have remote rendered photo real worlds and characters. That's where it needs to get to next, because the first question we get is, this is an amazing experience, you've got this cool headset, it's got a big cable, how can we cut the cord, how can we get 10 people in the experience, and how can we push absolutely photo real experiences to these things, and we want that too. But that's why we kind of work 6 to 12 months ahead. We're kind of designing ideas now for where the technology will be by the time we get to build it as well. Yeah. So that's what we're looking at. It's just really enabling tools.
Yeah, a really good example of that, I think, is the Green Planet AR experience, which Factory 42, who did one of our other demonstrators, but they've brought South by, but in the London thing where they ran it, it was all 5G and edge compute, and it was so smooth, and you took somebody who isn't in the industry along, and they went, this is just miles better than anything I've seen, because it was the latency thing. So Sarah,
what do you want to happen?
Yeah, what do you want someone else to do so that you can then go brilliant?
Exactly, I'd love loads of people. I think one of the biggest challenges over the past few years has been compromise. We've had to deal with a level of constraint which is completely, utterly overwhelming in some parts of our industry. We've lost, but we've found, and I would look at hope, and I would like people to do audacious, ambitious, risk-taking things in their practice and unlock a lot of that learned behaviour that we've had over the past couple of years with the pandemic. And I would love to think about how we bring in people to play with us now. So we've had these brilliant programmes, and we've created work for the time that we've been in, and I'd really like to look at future voices, younger voices, and to play. And I would love to see that, and it's something that we've all got a bit serious, and I would really like to see the fun and the joy come back in people's work in ways where it's not me going to another practitioner going, well done, you did really well to do that. That was amazing in the context, and see the trauma of that. I want to see craft, I want to see excellence, I want to see ambition, I want to see scale, and I want to see audacity. I want to see that.
Okay, fantastic. And that's a bit of a different message, I think, than the one we've gone, which has been, it's all been created, now let's apply it, is actually let's go further. And also, you raise an important issue, which is comedy in XR. Just saying, there's not a lot of it about, is there? Right, last word,
Very
Leia.
serious subject.
Very serious subject, and we're all very serious people. Leia, last word, audiences, what data do you really wish you had that someone else has slaved over so you could use it?
Well, I mean, if anyone wants to help us with this challenge, we would be very happy to collaborate. I mean, one of the things that we noticed in Dream and in a lot of our work is what we're kind of dubbing the interaction paradox, which is that for new forms of storytelling where we're layering in lots of elements of interaction, it's really challenging for audiences to attend. I mean, we know that our attentional processes are limited. How do you attend to the story that's playing out in front of you whilst you're being asked to do things in that space, and maybe with technology that you're not familiar with? So something that we think is a huge challenge is unpicking what are the design techniques, what are the story world-building techniques which really help people to focus their attention. So that's where we would like some help. And
that's
challenge.
cool, and really good advice for anybody who's ever had a Netflix party, because you can't remember anything about the film you watched.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you very much, the three of you. There's lots of hooks into, particularly that last round of what people were saying, into Unboxed, I think, which we'll hear about later, and particularly say something like Story Trails, which is next generation creatives. But thank you, all three of you. We've yet an into them time, so we better run off stage, but we'll probably be in the bar if anybody wants to ask questions, follow up on any of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.